Hi there, I'm Andrew Bohr, and I wanted to make an old-fashioned to just kind of do a one-take kind of quick idea of what an old-fashioned type of class would look like. It is one of the most classic cocktails there is. It's actually the actual definition of a cocktail. It's just going to be whiskey, bitters, and a little bit of sugar. This is simple syrup here. But the old-fashioned cocktail dates back to 1805, where a cocktail was first defined in print as a combination of spirit, sugar, bitters, and water. The ice is over here. So what I want to do is kind of make these for you and kind of talk about them as we go. The first thing to talk about is, of course, the whiskey. Now this is bourbon, which is a style of whiskey. If you will, all of it's whiskey. Pretty much everything that people think of in the spirit world is whiskey. Whiskey is a spirit that's made from grain. That's it. Now in America, we have several different types, the most popular of which is bourbon, a style of whiskey, and that's going to be made principally from corn. Now, if you want to talk about whiskeys of the world, you've got rye whiskey, which in America has a different definition as it does other places, but that's going to be a whiskey made mostly of rye being the grain. Irish whiskey, which is of course whiskey from Ireland. It can be made out of all kinds of different things. This one is, for example, a blend of malts, which is barley, and grain. And this one's completely malt. They're both from Ireland. They're Irish whiskey. When I said malt, talking of single malt, this is of course a single malt Scotch. One distillery, single malt, barley, Scotch from Scotland. It can be a single malt from anywhere, but if it's not from Scotland, it's not a Scotch. So those are just some of the types of whiskey that you can kind of think of. But we've got our bourbon in there, a nice strong cask strength, that is with no water added. We're going to add a little bit of simple syrup. And the reason we're going to add simple syrup to that, about 1/4 of a part compared to how much spirit we have, the reason that we're adding that is because adding granulated sugar or adding a sugar cube is something that's not going to dissolve in spirit. Sugar doesn't dissolve in spirit. And this bottle, especially being cask strength, is mostly alcohol and very little of its water. This is 126 proof, so hardly any water in that bottle at all. And sugar, though it will dissolve in water, doesn't dissolve so well in spirit. So the last ingredient is going to be bitters. Now, bitters are kind of confusing for a lot of people. Now, these are the salt and pepper in cocktails. We're going to add 2 dashes, and that's a dash. A lot of people are afraid of bitters because they're bitter by name. This is not a dash. It's not going to make a cocktail too bitter. When you want to do a dash of bitters, I'm going to try to give you an idea of what that looks like. That's going to be 1 dash. That much bitters is 1 dash. The only thing to worry about with bitters is them staining your clothing. Now, what bitters actually do for the cocktail, like I said, they do that seasoning, that salt and that pepper. But when you think of like what is going to go into a bitters, think things that are on the aroma. Now when you think about syrups, you're going to think about flavors. Now this is going to add the flavor of like sweetness and sugar. If it was a liqueur, it would add that kind of fruit flavor. On the bitters side of things, we're adding aroma. And when you want to talk about what to put in your bitters, think of what aromas you want to have. And one of the ways I always like to talk to people about that really easily, like a great way to remember what bitters do, is think of lavender. Now lavender smells lovely. Like we want to have that in our home and want to wash our hands with that. Do you want to eat lavender? Not so much. It's kind of bitter. It's kind of tastes soapy because it makes soap a lot. So you wouldn't put it in a syrup. But if you want the aroma, you put it in a bitters. So when you think of bitters, think about the types of aroma that you're going to add. Now, the old-fashioned is a cocktail that is all spirit, that is all things that you can see. So we're going to give that a stir. We're going to put that in the stirring glass and fill it up with ice. How much ice you might add? Always going to be more ice than you're going to need to fill the actual glass. Grab the spoon, give it a quick stir. When you want to think about how long you stir a cocktail, this is how you make it cold. This is how you add a little bit of dilution. And what I always like to tell people is you stir a cocktail long enough to explain the plot of your favorite movie. So I'll say that Blade Runner stars Harrison Ford, and it's about androids and what it really means to be human. And it's got a really great improv denouement with Rutger Hauer. Love that stuff. and that's about how long it takes to stir a cocktail. So, we're now going to strain this cocktail. It's a really hot day out today, so I'm going to strain it over ice. Just going to grab a big chunk here and cut that down real quick. Now you can always grab an ice mold, but I think it's a little more fun to just make a big block yourself. And give this a quick strain. Now the final ingredient is an orange zest. Now this is a little bit tricky because this is a zester, and this is not what we're going to use. This is a microplane to be specific by brand name. This is a channel knife, that's what a lot of people use. But what we're going to use is a Y peeler. This is my favorite Y peeler for food, but it makes a very, very thin zest. We want a very big zest. And we're going to zest that right over the glass. We're going to use it correctly though. We're going to go right over the glass. And the reason we're going to do it that way is because we want that nice orange essence going in the cocktail. If we had a really good close-up on this, you could see the oils going in. But to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like, I'm just going to kind of cut a little piece of this orange here. That's called a disc. And to give you an idea of how much oil is going to be in that, I'm going to give it a little toast and squeeze the oil into it. That was the actual oil in the orange lighting on fire. And the reason that we zest over the glass is to get those oils into the glass. So there you have it. That's the most basic whiskey old-fashioned. And notice I said whiskey old-fashioned. We're using bourbon on this one. Talked about other types of whiskey as well, but you can use any aged spirit. For example, use Armagnac made from grapes. You can use a rum agricole made from sugarcane. And as you get to understand the old-fashioned better, you can use different types of bitters. Perhaps Peychaud's bitters to give it a bit of a tropical and drier side, or maybe some grapefruit bitters made by Scrappies. And that's the first cocktail we're going to talk about. Cheers.